Hello, I'm Lee Hatcher from HammondCare Public Affairs at our Woy Woy home on the New South Wales Central Coast, continuing the great conversations in the Profile series. This time with Meredith Gresham, who has a thing about toilets. More about that later. Meredith is an occupational therapist and has also been captivated by psychiatry, especially in the care of older people. She delivered a presentation to the very first HammondCare conference in 1996 and joined the organisation a year or so later. Meredith, thanks so much for joining us.
Great pleasure, Lee.
What was it that first drew you to the care of older people and also to HammondCare?
Firstly, the care of older people. I'll tell you a secret. I thought I moved about the same speed that they did. Now, I like older people. Older people bring a great deal of wisdom and life experience that's often forgotten in today's fast-paced society. HammondCare, I think HammondCare found me, and it ended up being a bit of my home.
So what is it about the character of HammondCare that made you feel like that?
What we say is that we respect the person. We think of people as individuals at HammondCare. That's who I am as a person, and that's who I am as an occupational therapist.
And it actually happens. They're not just words.
No, I believe it actually happens. I think you have to be vigilant, but it actually happens.
Meredith, you were one of the first people in the whole realm of aged care to get design and to pursue that, how the buildings are built. Where did that come from?
Going back again to my training as an OT, one of the important things that we use in our therapeutic toolbox is modifying the environment to help people do stuff, do activities and tasks that give life meaning and purpose. Now, over 3 decades, we haven't been able to produce a good symptomatic treatment for dementia. It's really important that we understand how we can help people improve, and one of the main ways we can do that is through modifying the environment. We can modify in little ways, such as seating, or we can modify in big ways, which is actually the bricks and mortar of the buildings that we build.
But when you started to get that, it was very new thinking in aged care, wasn't it?
It was very new thinking. I started another job in a 40-bed, very large nursing home as the director of dementia care. I was employed when they'd actually poured the cement slab, and I was appalled. This large building meant that people wandered aimlessly for hours. They couldn't find their rooms, they couldn't find the bathroom, they couldn't find the dining room. It was so obvious that environmental design was absolutely crucial to the ability of that person to function, but also for their own dignity and self-esteem.
Fast forward to 2005, you had left HammondCare, then returned. You also authored a major report for New South Wales Health. Explain that report to us.
I was employed by the Royal College of Australian and New Zealand Psychiatrists to look into the management and accommodation of people with really severely challenging behaviours. Really severely challenging behaviours. How could we accommodate and care for this group of people? I spent 3 years of my life working on this report, did thousands of interviews, lots of focus groups, and ended up coming up with policy for New South Wales Health. That policy then translated into what we now know as Linden. Unfortunately, we only have 2 such units in New South Wales, and I think there should be quite a few more.
There are an awful lot of people in HammondCare who get a great deal out of what they do. And they rush to say, I'm not in it for what I get out of it. But what does your job give you, Meredith?
One of the things I value most about HammondCare is the trust that they placed in me, and I hold that trust very dearly. I have the freedom and the ability to talk with my colleagues and the executive and say, this is what I believe HammondCare should be looking at and doing. Sometimes they say no, but more often than not they say yes. And they give the opportunity to stretch and think about the sorts of things we're doing. So a program like Going to Stay at Home, a wild and wacky idea of converting an 8-bed cottage at Miranda into delivering carer training, we were allowed to do it. We got the funding, we did it, we showed it worked.
Now, I mentioned your special interest in toilets. Where did that start?
In 2009, 2010, I was part of a team when we were looking at assistive technology, new or novel assistive technologies for carers of people living with dementia. From that project, we trialled 16 different types of technology and we had two standouts. One was the electronic toilet top bidet. The feedback we got from those carers raised my curiosity and I said, we've got to try this out in a more controlled environment in a residential aged care facility. So here we are, trying them out.
Can you show us what you're talking about?
It'd be a pleasure, but I do hasten to add, it's a clinical curiosity, not a fetish. Carers told us that by using one of these bidets with the person living with dementia, they were using far fewer incontinence products, they had far fewer urinary tract infections, and the person had their dignity restored, which I think is one of the key elements. None of us want to have another person end up wiping our bottom. It's just not dignified. It's a toilet seat replacement. It has a heated toilet seat, which we've actually had painted black in line with the HammondCare design principles. It houses the electronics in the back here. What happens is, by remote control, a carer will say to the person, "Are you finished?" And then they'll actually use one of these buttons to give the person either a front or a rear wash after voiding bladder or bowels. It's not an unpleasant experience. It is quite surprising the first time you experience it.
Very different.
Very different if you're not used to it. But the carers here at Ashley Cottage were very careful to tell me that the success of using the bidet with the residents was entirely based upon the staff's ability to communicate that something unusual was about to happen.
So you've prepared this one earlier, as they say. There's Glad wrap on the top. Show us how it works.
The bidet has two retractable self-cleaning nozzles. I simply press for a rear cleanse. This button, a nozzle comes out and begins to clean the person. You can press the move button to make it move backwards and forwards. You can press the width button, which means it'll give a broader or a narrower spray. As the nozzle retracts, it actually has water that dribbles around it to clean the nozzle. And basically that's it. When you've finished with the cleaning operation, you can press the air dry button and a dryer then gently puffs warm air at you to clean you. This is really good. People who have incontinence, and that's most of our residents, are very subject to actually having a condition known as incontinence-associated dermatitis. And that's where, when you're sitting in a warm, wet incontinence pad, it really will break down skin very quickly. And in fact, elderly skin is particularly susceptible to this. A good wash will actually cleanse the area of any of those nasties that come in urine, and a good dry will also help maintain skin health.
How did the residents initially respond?
Again, it was generally with surprise. Some staff were actually quite reluctant because it's a bit difficult to explain to somebody who has limited communication that all of a sudden your toilet is going to start spraying at you. So quite a novel concept. But what we found was that the residents at Ashley Cottage got used to the experience very quickly and indeed even asked for the bidet to be switched on.
And the facts and figures really prove the effectiveness of this in terms of urinary tract infections, continence pads. We
had 7 bidets originally installed in a 14-bed cottage at Ashley, and we saved on average over the 3-month period of the trial $2,008 on incontinence products. So that's only with 7 bidets. And that's across an 84-bed facility.
And you're now doing a PhD on this. To what end?
I think the bidet has good potential to reduce urinary tract infections. It's really tricky to demonstrate that conclusively, and that's what my PhD in part is working on. If we can reduce urinary tract infections, we will reduce prescriptions of antibiotics. We've had a lot of information in the press of recent times that we are fast developing very resistant strains of bacteria. Antibiotics are going to be useless unless we curb their usage.
So it'll be soon Dr. Meredith Gresham.
I hope so, if I get time to write the PhD up.
Meredith, final question, always in the profile series, is what floats your boat outside of work?
Family, bike riding, playing flute.
You were one of Queensland's first buskers.
That's right. I originally trained as a classical musician, and my first job was playing in the Queensland Theatre Orchestra. But to supplement the income, I busked down the main street of Brisbane in the days when busking was illegal. Luckily, I never got arrested.
Meredith Gresham, it's been a delight talking with you. What a rich life and work life. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, Lee.